get the recording on. Yep, okay. Okay, everybody, welcome back. This is part 2 of the Soul Cage. I hope you enjoy it. It's amazing how humans act in the aftermath of wonder. What may have taken place in seconds can eradicate an eternity of careful planning. And so it was with the postgrad people. Their research training availed them nothing. Academic distance was thrown to the four winds. They came out of their trance-like amazement, wanting to question what had occurred, completely forgetting the terms of pretended objectivity that they were supposed to maintain. Zach, in particular, was bouncing around the Beardy Boys, asking if they'd ever experienced anything like it, pleading for a theory of what just happened. Jack and Eve excitedly spoke over each other, theorising what they thought was going on. Hannah was the one most badly affected, and she breathed heavily as though staving off a panic attack. Kirsty just kept repeating, "OMG," until she realised no one was paying her any attention, and then tried to engage the clearly shaken Hannah in her own excited speculations about ear pops and hair raising. In direct contrast, Lily, her brothers, and Gavin were excited, but I have to say were professional, and immediately organised what they called a walkthrough with Lily. From what I understood, this would involve the brothers setting up laptops and various other bits of equipment in the kitchen, and Gavin filming Lily as she explored those parts of the house to which we were permitted access. Gavin's camera would be linked to their PCs. The purpose of this, Lily explained to everyone very quickly, was to establish any centres of psychic energy that stood out as worth investigating, so that the Beardies, not actually called Mikey and Beck, she didn't say which was which, could make informed decisions about where to place cameras, recorders, and other paranormal detection devices in real time. As futile as this sounded to me, the ghost crew were at least prepared and collected in their response and had protocols to follow. I watched the postgrads flounder until I could stand it no more, discreetly nudged Eve into getting everyone in order and remind them of the team's role in the venture. It wasn't just because of Professor Courtney's reputation. Good grief, the man could be demoted to chalk monitor for all I cared. Or because I had a soft spot for the students. No, the only soft spot I had in mind for them was quicksand. I'm loath to admit it, but I was embarrassed. Here I was defending the scientific against the fanciful, upholding the integrity of rational analysis against that mind killer, unfounded faith. And the academics, my colleagues, like it or not, were all to pieces. I believe it did give Eve a jolt when I approached her. Do excuse me. I believe it did give Eve a jolt when I approached her. At last she noticed me, and it seemed to shake her out of her ponderings on atmospheric changes and static electricity. Still wide-eyed, she gathered the postgrads around her and issued reminders about note-taking, observation, and the golden rule about not interfering in the activities of the paranormal investigators. This seemed effective as the postgrads moved as one to collect their notebooks. With focus, perhaps they could catch themselves before falling into that most unforgivable of errors in the annals of research, forgetting the objectives of the observation and falling into the scenery instead. Just where they ought not to be involved. In spite of the fact that she had needed reminding, Eve did pretty well in delegating the actions to be taken by the group without being bossy or patronising, and it was good to see her spring into action. I saw her noticing that Hannah was not fit to observe a walkthrough and decide that Zach would be more disruptive than useful, due to his excitable tendencies. Well, that was encouraging. She nominated Jack to observe the walkthrough, and he saddled up accordingly. Hannah was to stay in the kitchen with Mikey and Beck, drinking tea and calming down, whilst ostensibly observing whichever one was Mikey, whilst Kirsty was to take notes on possibly Beck's responses to the information that Lily and Gavin sent through. Eve assigned Zach to assisting her in the assembling and sorting into 6 small piles, papers outlining the legal, ethical and research method protocols for each of the postgrad participants, and me. Yes, you'd have thought that field folders would have been sorted out prior to travelling. However, given how useful the task was in keeping Zach occupied until he calmed down and decided to act like a researcher, what had been an oversight turned out to be an accidental boon. I chose to observe from the kitchen and placed my chair behind Mikey and Beck. They jumped as though they'd never seen me before, and then recognition washed across their faces. It seemed everyone around me was jumpy. I was placed in a perfect position, able to see the screen and watch Hannah and Kirsty as they, facing me and the boys, but not the screen, proceeded to take notes. Kirsty handed Mikey and Beck the printed sheets, which reiterated the purpose of the observation, and started a read through. They should not be disturbed by their note-taking, as these were simply observations, etc., etc., when the bearded one simultaneously shushed her. Complete silence from guest observers during the walkthrough, said possibly Mikey, sharply. Kirsty obligingly shut up, and Hannah seemed to come out of her trance a little. Good, I thought, good. Watching the walkthrough via the screen was interesting from several aspects. For one thing, it was a tour of the central block and west wing of the house. As you moved through, Lily placed numbered post-its on the outside of each room they visited as they left them. If only it weren't for such a futile purpose, I would commend it as an eminently sensible method of tracking. I noticed that she would stop every now and again as though listening. Sometimes she would wrap her arms around herself and say, cold spot, room X, or residual energy pulse, corridor between room Y and Z. These were noted down by possibly Beck, whilst possibly Mikey kept a gimlet eye on the screen, and Lily asking once or twice if she were doing okay. This was the second interesting thing. Emotional relationships in the ghost hunting group could be seen in sharp technicolor when they were in action. For example, in spite of Mikey and Beck's apparent indifference to their sister, they demonstrated care and concern. I didn't doubt that if asked, they would have shrugged off such a suggestion as arising from their interest in the investigation. But there was tenderness there. The outfacing show of professional distance from their sister was flapdoodle. Their anxiety for her was genuine. I noted too that Lily checked in with Gavin and even Jack to see if they were all right and not alarmed or stressed. Perhaps she recognised that whether or not a body believed in alternate states of being, be they ever so logical, the lizard brain, the centre of fear, could still kick in. I was quite touched by this consideration of others, even though, had I been viewing this on television, I would have marked it down as a cynical inducement to think that there really was something to be frightened of. I felt differently about Lily. She was sincere. I shook myself a little. Come on, Maxie boy, I told myself, this is how it happens. It's the trust factor. Just because a person is nice, has a lovely smile, and would make a perfect mother for your children. Well, there goes objectivity, I thought. Thirdly, I was struck by the experience of watching the activities of others via a screen in real time. This was a first for me and should have felt surreal, but in fact it prompted a type of empathy. Anyone watching was there with them and yet not, which had the psychological effect of becoming invested, involved. The vicarious nature of this form of observation was captivating, but quite complex to consider. The walkthrough continued. Possibly Beck now and again to ask possibly Mikey how he felt about placing an ovulus or spirit box in a particular spot, or if triggers were appropriate. Possibly Mikey answered each question promptly, continuing to watch the screen as though scanning for a zombie attack. Not much seemed to be happening at the camera end for a while, though very soon they had to start turning lights on in corridors and rooms. This was balm for straining eyes, as the screen had been growing darker as time passed, and the night threw its big, grey, wet dog of a blanket over the house. About an hour into the walkthrough, there was a sudden gasp from the business end of things. Lily, Gavin and Jack had gone up a level to work their way along the third floor corridor. As they turned into the hallway and switched on the light, they saw that all the bedroom doors wore numbered post-its. Lily moved forward to examine them and, turning to the following camera, informed us that it was her writing and that they seemed to have ended up on the second floor again. Lily, you just walked upstairs from the second floor. You can't still be on the second floor. This was possibly Mikey. Keep filming, Gavin. We'll split the screen and watch the second floor footage. Possibly Beck tapped a few keys and found some frames of the second floor. It's the same wallpaper, Mikey, he whispered, and the same door numbers. They're on the second floor. These were in undertones, presumably to prevent alarming Lily and Gavin unnecessarily. Mikey considered for a few seconds. Lily, Gavin et al., go back upstairs. Gavin, hold the camera at shoulder level as per and keep recording. We're not breaking the sequence. Aye, sir, he replied. We watched via Gavin's shaky camera work as Lily trekked back downstairs, followed by a handheld and, I imagined, a puzzled Jack. The downstairs light was still on, and we, who had the benefit of what the exploration team was seeing, awaited Lily's reaction to seeing the same numbered post-its on the same doors along what appeared to be the same corridor. We heard Jack in the background declaring shakily, "You're shitting me." Now Mikey, seeing Lily's puzzlement. Lily, check the post-its and the doors. Check the wallpaper. Lily did as bid and responded on an out-breath. We're on the second floor. Mikey, as though reassuring himself. Okay, that's good. That's where you're supposed to be. That checks out as it should. Now, go back upstairs and you should be on the third floor. I'm heading there now. Come on, Gav. Come on, Jack. Stay close. That sounded like one nervous psychic to me. What on earth were they up to? How could you mistake up for down? I mean, we had witnessed everything via the camera. Jack, who was many shades of foolish, was not directionally challenged, and he was sounding like a worried man. Up and down are two opposing directions, right? It's a basic fact. Lily made her decision, and we watched as they ascended once more. Would it surprise you, as it did me, that as they pulled into the entry of the next landing, they were once more on the second floor? This time, without advice from her brothers, Lily invited Gavin to film her entering the rooms, asking Beck, are you on it, bro? Via the split screen, Beck flicked back to the first recording of the second floor. Anyone watching that screen could confirm that Lily, Gavin and Jack were on the second floor corridor and filming the same rooms. This was enough for Mikey. Lily, Gav, grab Jack and get out of there. Get back here ASAP. At this point, Eve dropped all pretense at note-taking and joined me at the observation post. What's happening? Are they in danger? She was thinking, of course, of Jack. Stay quiet, we need clear communication with them, hissed Beck, who then patted her arm, presumably to take the sting out of his tone. Lily again. We're coming down, stand by. Hannah and Kirsty were frozen, though Zach was almost hopping on the spot for a chance to get near the screen. Eve had made a good call in keeping him away from the walkthrough. He would have been in hysterics at this point. As it was, Jack seemed to be having his own crisis. Gavin placed him at the front of the camera, just behind Lily, who led another attempt to get away from the second floor. We could all hear his breathing, which was becoming a little laboured. Eve whispered to me tightly, "He has asthma." I nodded to acknowledge her concern. Her panic was palpable. A cold feeling gripped my chest, but I breathed it out as best I could and stayed glued to the screen. The camera currently showed them making their way down the same staircase as before and arrive at the second floor again. We heard Jack moan. Gavin managed a couple of expletives before Lily took action again, and instead of moving them into the corridor any further, directed Gavin and Jack to stay on the stairs. At the other end of the corridor was another staircase, part of the central staircase that led to the hall downstairs. She was looking down the hall, and I wondered whether she would consider accessing the flight at the other end when Mikey spoke. "Go for it, Lils, take the other staircase." Gavin had started to move forward with Jack in front of him, but Lily held up a forbidding hand. "No." "No?" Mikey again. "Not for all the world with a cherry on the top." "What?" This must have been a kind of code, judging by a sudden shift in the brothers' body language. Beck murmured, "Shit, Mikey, how bad for her to say that." "Shush, Lily will know what to do, she always does." Lily spoke full face to the camera. To me. "Max, I know you're there. I'm going to need your help. Yes?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. I could see Jack hovering around her, looking confused and breathing heavily now. Gavin counselled him to slow his breathing. Evidently, he had left his inhaler in his room. Foolish, given that we were working in an old house with who knows what dust and chemicals waltzing through our airways. It was clear that he needed his albuterol toot sweet. "Send Zach for the longest coil of cord out of the trunk in the hall marked gearbox." "On it," Zach responded swiftly. "Quietly, Zach," she warned, "and take Kirsty with you. Everyone stay in pairs, at least for now." Whilst Zach and Kirsty headed off to the hall, Lily relayed her instructions to us sotto voce. "Eve, Hannah, head up to Jack's room for his inhaler and bring it to the kitchen. The first floor is safe, trust me. Now!" They raced off immediately to the first floor via the side stairs. Lily continued, "Max, you're going to tie one end of the cord around your waist. Bring Jack's inhaler with you, as well as the salt shaker from the kitchen counter. Then make your way up to the second floor via the side staircase, the same one we've been using. Trickling a line of salt up the center of the steps." She paused. "And you'll need to take your shoes and socks off." "What?" "Us too. Gavin and Jack, get your shoes and socks off. Carry yours, Jack. Gav, keep filming and I'll get yours off." After a brief kerfuffle, the three were barefoot, as was I. Zach and Kirsty made it back first with the coiled rope, to which I immediately attached myself. Then Eve and Hannah arrived. Eve shook Jack's inhaler, ready for him to use. They looked at me askance. "Are you going in?" asked Zach, champion of the bloody obvious. To avoid letting sarcasm get the better of me, I opted for a symbol, "looks like," in the vain hope that he would, under the present circumstances, shut up. No chance. "I wish it was me going in." There was a distant boom and crash from the direction of the central staircase. "Yes," I responded sincerely, "so do I." In the absence of any kind friends holding me back, begging me not to go, I set off for the foot of the side staircase, with Eve observing me from the kitchen door at the other end of the hallway. Remembering my instructions, I ascended spilling salt on the steps all the way up to the first stage. Aware that my heart had suddenly started beating very hard and very fast, I hesitated a moment. Lily shouted down, "Keep going, Max." I continued upward, still spreading the salt over all the steps I ascended. I reached the second floor, and there they were, all standing near the stairwell. "Put the salt away in your pocket." I obeyed, though still puzzled. I handed the wheezing Jack his inhaler, and he inhaled deeply twice. Lily sighed in relief and gave me a look of gratitude. "Now listen, Jack," she said, "we need to move quickly. I know you need longer to settle your breathing, but it will soon be over and we can take care of you downstairs." Jack signalled his agreement, saving his breath for his lungs. We got ready to begin our descent. Lily explained what was going to happen, and we stood by to follow her instructions. Everyone looped themselves onto the rope behind me. I was first in the line, Lily close second, in order to issue directions, with Jack behind her and handheld Gavin as tail end Charlie. Lined up on the landing and ready to go upstairs, Lily instructed us all to close our eyes and keep them shut. "Your senses are deceiving you," she explained, "but Max is going to help us resolve that. Now, when we step forwards, we will be only one step behind the person in front, so we need to move with care and precision. We don't need any accidents or stumbles on these stairs. Max, I need you to concentrate on moving smoothly and in rhythm. We will follow. And at the same time, and this is most important, you need to do this." She whispered in my ear, "Trust me, Max, whatever your feelings are, you've witnessed enough to know that things are seriously out of kilter here. Now, focus on the feel of salt underfoot. As soon as you step onto carpet that has no salt scattered, tell me, and we will stop and turn around. I know it's counterintuitive, but you're going to have to trust me, and Jack needs to get out of here." Okay. So, connected by a rope chain, we four blind mice walked in slow rhythm down the staircase towards, hopefully, the ground floor. I felt a draft as we passed the first floor, but otherwise progressed as smoothly as any four unsighted people tied together on a staircase could. And then it happened, just as Lily had predicted. I stepped on a stair that was unsalted. I could feel underfoot on the thin carpet a distinct lack of salt. "Lily," I said. "Okay," she whispered back. Then, as quietly as she could, told us all to turn around 180 degrees and walk up the steps, keeping our eyes tightly shut, and in spite of anything our senses were telling us, to keep walking carefully and in rhythm as before. With Gavin in the lead, we obeyed our instructions, and after what seemed an age, felt a flat stone floor beneath our feet, and on Lily's order, opened our eyes to find ourselves on the ground floor corridor. Eve sprinted forward to drag Jack into the kitchen for glasses of water, hugging him and scolding him for getting his inhaler, but mostly hugging him. Shockingly, I received a huge hug of my own from Mikey and Beck. "Thanks, man." Lily smiled lopsidedly at me. They loved their big sister more than they let on. They immediately let me out of the twin bear hug. "It was the camera," said Mikey with disgust. "That camera cost us much spondula." "Yeah, man, the camera," confirmed Beck unconvincingly, and they both returned to the screens to review the footage of us descending the side staircase to the ground floor. Lily and Gavin hurried to view it with them, and I was tempted, but had my duties to the students. Once I had ascertained that Jack didn't require any further medical aid, that no one was in hysterics, I left the postgrads to collect their wits in the kitchen. Lily silently invited me to follow her into the hall. Well, I asked, what did the camera show? As you'd imagine, it was very shaky. I must say I admired Gavin's determination to keep the camera running, whatever the situation, especially with his eyes closed, negotiating stares. Kid's a keeper, I'd say. But was it clear enough to show what was happening when we were all linked together? Oh, yes. We had enough light to see the line of salt, well done, by the way, and us following it all the way down. There was only one pause, which was when you said my name, and then we continued down. I was unnerved and almost, well, angry, I think, that my senses could have been so deceived. The most obvious explanation was hypnosis, and that would mean both Jack and I being under the influence. Was that what was happening here? My native cynicism rushed back. It would look good for them if they'd stumbled upon phenomena which was witnessed by researchers from a renowned university, wouldn't it? I mean, that would draw advertisers and sponsors and keep them in the kind of spondula that could buy them a few snazzy cameras and then some. And yet, I trusted this woman, this floaty, intelligent, confident, smart-assed woman. I was, you could say, conflicted. We made it to the main staircase to inspect any damage after the racket I'd heard just before I'd gone into the stairwell. We could see the rubble from the bottom of the steps in the hall where there must have been a ceiling collapse from above the first floor. Lily looked serious. We were being herded. She had theorised then that the tricking of the senses was edging towards the intentional. The exploration team were deliberately being frustrated from proceeding up or down the side staircase, she explained, and she had worked out that it had nothing to do with the second floor, but with driving them towards using the central staircase. She was throwing a grid of purpose over the event. I, being the resident skeptic, had to say it, of course. I mean, in my defense, anyone as cynical about the so-called paranormal might have done the same. Herded by what? And to what purpose? Who would benefit? Have the boys taken out life insurance on Gavin or something? But as soon as the words were leaving my mouth, I realised what an utter shithead I was being. But I had to go on. I let the words out instead of just doing what I was supposed to, which was either A, remain objective and observe, or B, comfort my potential girlfriend and just listen. But no, on I went. In the words of Shaky Bill, you are given to airy nothings, a local habitation and a name. What we all experienced on the stairs was mass delusion. You have to see that. She turned to face the staircase again, avoiding my gaze as she replied, and the camera and the screen? Did everyone watching happen to have the same delusion? For all we know, yes. I mean, right now I'm favouring hypnotism. Even if not that, how do we know there aren't some hallucinatory gases in the place? These old houses often use pest deterrents containing chemicals that are banned these days. It's certainly more probable than forces unknown battening onto a bunch of amateurs stumbling around dilapidated locations, faking touches and shadows and voices in the dark for the sake of the likes and the subscription button. If she'd shouted at me, it would have been easier, but she didn't. I felt a coldness again as she slid her eyes to regard me without turning her head. I wasn't worthy of a head turn, the move said. I felt a wave of anger and misery hit me. It was like a psychological slap across the face. And even as she walked away back to the kitchen, leaving me regretting my compulsive outburst, I actually felt a hard kick to my shin. Damn it, how did she do that? I turned to follow her and an electric light bulb exploded forbiddingly. I waited until she was out of sight before venturing into her wake. It was evident that we were all exhausted. Jack definitely needed to take it easy and would stay in Nurse Eve's room. Kirsty and Hannah would double up, Hannah looking positively cheered by the prospect, whilst Zach would bunk in with Gavin. Lily elected to share with her brothers, who had to remind her that they only had one double bed in theirs. She asked Mikey if he would come in with me, and that being settled, she would share with Beck. It was a largely subdued group who retired that night. I wouldn't like to be Gavin, though. Zach had entirely forsaken the notion of academic distance and was still full of questions. I hope Gav had the good sense to knock him on the head if he didn't shut up soon. The notion of setting up paranormal paraphernalia was abandoned to the body's demand for sleep. Mikey and I sorted out sleeping arrangements to our mutual convenience, and in no time, Mikey was snoring impressively. I wondered whether he'd ever considered having his adenoids removed. To be honest, I would have preferred to have shared with Lily, not that I thought I even had a chance with her now, but to apologise for the offensive things I'd said. The offensive things, no, not for the other things. I held sincerely to my points about rationality, even if I didn't have to blurt them out at that particular point. I knew, because of my growing respect for her intelligence, that she would understand scepticism. But I had been rude, and however well the words sounded in my own head, I had no need to say them out loud. This was the first time I'd ever questioned my behaviour. And on examination, I came up short. My face burned in the dark in those moments before sleep, my own arrogance haunting me all the way into eventual slumber. After a quiet night and an adequate breakfast, everybody got together to make decisions about the research and the paranormal investigations. Aware as I was of my responsibilities regarding my continued observation of the postgrad group, I regretted the lack of an opportunity to apologise to Lily privately. It would have to wait, but not too long, I hoped. After some discussion within and between the groups, Lily and Eve, as nominated speakers for the groups, made their announcement. Eve was to the point. Okay, everyone, this is what Lily and I are proposing. Lily and the boys have been kind enough to agree to cease research at this point and allow us to carry out a group interview following last night's events. In addition, because that won't give us enough evidence on which to base our case study, they've offered to come down to Canterbury in 2 weeks and invite us on an investigation of a notorious spot in the town. This will save us from having to drive up to Manchester at our own expense, mutual groan at this point, since we have already asked the Department of Psychology to fund the use of the minibus for this trip. On the departmental side, we can justify our early exit due to health and safety issues with the building. Then Lily. Mikey, Beck, Gavin and I will never give up on a location, but recognise that we need more bodies to help us scope out Highfields and carry out our investigation. This one won't be finding its way onto the internet any more than our other investigations. I winced at this, acutely aware of where this was aimed. As those of you who read the notes we forwarded via Eve will know, we are simply students of paranormal phenomena and not interested in gathering likes or any other kind of gain. Our only online presence is as part of the network of like-minded, not-for-profit researchers. Eve happened to know someone who had our contacts, so you were directed to us under fairly random circumstances. No advertising on the www for us. She smiled, then continued, I've been here before, and although aware that the house is worthy of investigation, had not seen anything like the activity we've witnessed here. I assure you that if I had, I would not have brought you along for safety reasons. The fabric of the building seems to have deteriorated at a rate improportionate to the length of time since my visit, so I cannot in conscience apologise for not informing you of the state of the place. Nonetheless, I am sorry. and I hope that us coming down south for a couple of expeditions will help you with your project. Eve piped up again. We are very, very grateful for this offer. She looked around the postgrads who nodded enthusiastically and was staying in close contact to make arrangements. Thanks, Lily. Guys, okay, it only remains for us to pack back up. We've time to look around the grounds if we say midnight for meeting back at the vans, ready for takeoff. Sorry, that was midday, not midnight. Then there was a lot of nodding, backslapping and handshaking and a descant of sighs of relief. Eve approached me to say sorry that she didn't check it out with me first, but I stopped her. Eve, you took the lead for this project and you rose to that responsibility. I can have no objection whatever, and I will back you up with the prof. Not a problem. She thanked me and made to walk away, but then turned and asked, Max, may I call you Max? Something I must ask you. Did you come by car? If so, would you drop Jack and me off back home? I want to keep Jack away from any aggravation, and Zach is still a coiled spring. Would you mind terribly? I assured her I would if I'd come by car, but reminded her that I'd travelled in the van with them. Oh, do you know that's really thrown me? We were halfway here before I realised I hadn't seen you in the van. Where were you? In the back, I said. It's the strangest thing, I know, but none of us remember seeing you until, I don't know, but you were there and had always been, sort of. Doesn't make sense. Oh, I seem to have the ability to blend into the scenery, it seems. God, you'd make a good spy. She rejoined Jack and the others, and as she moved away, I heard another voice behind her. So you do know that you have that ability. Lily, that's my name. Lily, I'm so sorry. I know. We stood still for a few heartbeats, and then she said, let's get a bit of fresh air. Come on, grab your jacket. She'd brought my jacket to me. Yes, and the Scooby Gang, as you style them, will pack your bag and stow it in the minibus to give us a bit of time together. She really was 99 types of amazing. What's a chap to do in the face of such a fait accompli? Go for a walk, that's what. Lily, you have to let me apologise. I've always been a sarcastic sod, but I didn't see my own arrogance until yesterday. I still hold with the rationality over belief, but I really don't have to be an arse about it to people who have done nothing worse than disagree with my point of view. So I'm sorry, and believe me, I mean to do better in future. Believe you? Why should I believe in what I can't see? Are you asking me to have faith? Sorry, I don't do faith. I do knowledge. Fair play to you, I conceded. I deserve it. Oh, I'm not being sarcastic. What, do you think 24 hours in your company would see me adopting your bad habits? No, no, no. I want to see the change. Oh, stumped. I think I deserve proof if I'm to be the mother of your children, don't you think? My heart lifted. Is that what's going to happen? Well, I don't know. I'm a psychic, not a bloody fortune teller. We walked happily side by side for a while, smiling, not feeling the need to hold hands or talk. I was just enjoying the prospect of an immediate future with Lily in it. You must have given your parents nightmares, she said after a while, disappearing at will, playing tricks on them, sinking into the backdrop whenever something difficult arose. Probably accounts for your arrogance too, that ability to hide from problems, unlike the rest of us. Harsh, and only partly true, I answered. Until Eve mentioned it, I had entirely forgotten. I did it all the time when I was little. When I was about 7, my mum took me aside and had a talk with me about my tendency to phase out, as she put it. She told me that it made her feel very worried and sad and asked me not to do it anymore. To be honest, I think I forgot about it for a long time. It must have kicked in spontaneously because I really, really didn't want to come. Well, that explains a lot about your confusion and why others didn't notice you. You saw me? Yes, I saw someone who I recognise as a fellow adept. A psychic? Me? I'm not going to put that definition on you. That's not fair. You're still adjusting. I didn't really understand, but didn't want to push it. I changed the subject. Lily, what do you think is really going on in the house? You ready to hear it? That's why I'm asking. That's what most people say just before hearing something they're going to mock. I promise. Okay, here goes. I don't believe in ghosts. That may surprise you. I'm absolutely convinced that the dead remain dead and that what we take for messages from them is nothing more than our own hopes and fears at play. Then there's what goes on in many places that persuades people that a location is haunted. Now, I'm not averse to the idea that the living leave an imprint on a place and that what people sometimes experience is more akin to a recording. This is called a residual. I don't object to that as a possibility. Ah, the famous stone tape theory, I offered. That's right. Once very popular in the realms of psychic research. But what's going on here is more like, well, you're a scientist, right? Imagine a Faraday cage. It keeps electromagnetic energy out, or sometimes in, right? Well, I have an inkling that places high fields, like high fields, act in a similar way, right? Well, only on the spiritual plane, for which read less definable energies. Well, the soul cage, because that's what it is, holds a number of souls, living or dead, and once that number reaches critical mass, needs to release some. There's also an obverse possibility that residual energies held in the soul cage cannot pass through it until they have replacements. The soul cage requires a certain amount of residual energy, that is to say, non-living energy, to maintain itself. I was puzzled, so Lily continued. Look, you know the story about the boatman, the one where he's doomed to eternally ferry the dead across a black river? Well, he can only escape if he finds another living soul to take the oar from him. One day, an unsuspecting victim begs him to row him across so that he can be with his dead wife. The boatman knows that this is his chance, and once in the boat, the man is asked to hold the oar for a second whilst the boatman unties the rope. Immediately the man takes it, the boatman jumps onto land and leaves the poor man to his fate. And the soul cage acts like this. I don't know, but I think so. There must be some residuals in the building who have to await replacements to arrive before they can pass on. The building and they are non-sentient, but both act as they must. There's no harm meant, but harm can still be given. So you felt that you, Jack and Gavin, were being urged along the corridor towards a ceiling collapse that would have enabled the residuals to leave the soul cage. A goldfish to the gentleman in the throes of cynicism over here. No, really, I said, seriously, not cynicism, healthy skepticism. But I'm listening. Vast improvement, she answered, and slipped her hand into my pocket and wiggled it into mine. Cold hands, she said. You're as bad as your brothers. We meandered a while until we spotted Jerry, presumably coming out to wish us farewell. He must have come out to examine the damage on the staircase and seen everybody packing up. I'm sorry, Jerry, I should have come to tell you. We're cutting this short. He waved away my apologies. Not at all, not at all. I'm just glad everyone's all right. Oh, hello, Lily. Hello, Dad. You okay? Yes, just checked in with the boys. I'll be seeing you in Manchester next month. Yes, indeedy. Ignoring my wonderment, Lily asked her father, Jerry, how many people were there all together in the building yesterday and today? I'm just trying to work out what critical mass is. Oh, I'm not going to ask. Well, aside from you lot, just me. Oh, so that would be you, me, Max here, Mikey and Beck, Gavin, Jack, Eve, Kirsty, Hannah and Zach. 11. 13, I corrected her. You forgot the 2 builders. Oh, Jerry responded without missing a beat. We don't have any builders, son. Good night.